Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke today to Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz. In a statement, Trudeau's office said it was stressed that Israel needs to take, quote, all possible measures to protect civilians and minimize casualties. That after Trudeau told Israel earlier this week to exercise maximum restraint.
The world is witnessing this, the killing of women and children, of babies. This has to stop.
For more on Trudeau's statements, we've reached Palestinian-Canadian lawyer Diana Buttu. She's the former Palestinian Liberation Organization spokesperson, and she joins me now. Diana, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The Prime Minister's call for maximum restraint by Israel caused quite a reaction here domestically and provoked a response from Prime Minister Netanyahu. I wonder if it's resonating more broadly in Israel and with the Palestinians.
No, not at all. Look, we're hoping and wanting and expecting to hear from the Canadian Prime Minister that he calls for a complete and total ceasefire. But instead, he's taken this middle line road, which for the Israelis means that they can continue business as usual. And for Palestinians means that this process of decimating Gaza is going to continue. So it's not been heard. It's not resonating at all. And this is why it's so crucial, so important for world leaders to now stand up and say enough. Gaza cannot sustain this. And the whole point of the international system is to prevent this type of decimation. It's not to foster it.
If it's not resonating more broadly over there, why do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu and the opposition leader were so forceful in their response to what the Prime Minister had to say?
I think that the big issue is that they're taking their cue from the United States. And when you hear a president who is saying full steam ahead, who has people saying finish them when it comes to Gaza and so on, it displays a lack of world leadership. And this is where I would hope that Canada would separate rather than join the chorus of this. We've already heard the French come forward and say that this is enough. We've already been hearing from the United Nations that this needs to stop as well. All 18 agencies that operate in Gaza are saying that this is amounting to genocide and must stop. And so this is where we see that it's up to the world to come forward, world leaders to come forward and be forceful in their statement and say stop, not ease up, not be more precise, but to simply stop.
It seems, though, we're not going to see that from the Canadian Prime Minister, the U.S. President, or the British Prime Minister in the short term. Who knows where this goes in the future, but we have seen them more forcefully call for protections of hospitals, for greater precision on civilians. The Prime Minister here is getting a lot of grief for saying people are seeing the killing of women and children and of babies in Gaza. That's caused the most forceful pushback. How is that being perceived over there, if at all?
He's right. Look, 62% of the people who've been killed in the Gaza Strip are women and children, almost 50% of them being children. And so this is not an attack on Hamas. This is a war against Palestinians in Gaza. When we're approaching a death toll of 12,000, that's just from bombings. God only knows how many more are going to die as a result of starvation. And so this is why we are seeing that it's time for them to stop. Now, it's not just a question of not attacking hospitals, but we've seen that Israel has attacked 50% of Palestinian homes, that more than 1.5 million out of the 2.2 million Palestinians have fled to the south. Now, this is the place that is the most densely populated on earth. And imagine that it's now been cut in half with 1.5 million people fleeing to the south. They can't handle that. This is why it's absolutely imperative for this to stop. I believe that if they understand what it's like to live in Gaza, what it is that Israel is doing, which is effectively carpet bombing, when you see 6,000 bombs dropped per week on a tiny little space that is barely the size of Toronto, then you can understand the depth of destruction that is happening now. This is what the world system was designed to do. It was designed to make sure that the most vulnerable people in the world are protected. And instead, we're giving carte blanche to Israel to continue to bomb people who are refugees, who are stateless, and who are now homeless as well.
World opinion, I don't know where world opinion is, but certainly public opinion in Canada has shown a shift towards supporting a ceasefire, with 65% in a recent poll suggesting they wanted to see one called. Even a majority opinion right now in the United States suggests that a majority of Americans would like to see a ceasefire called. The political leadership is obviously not there, and they point to things like what the Hamas leadership did on television in Lebanon, where they said, we're going to do October 7th again and again and again and again. How do you move forward when Hamas is making statements like that, threatening to repeat the atrocities of the 7th of October?
You're absolutely right that there's a disconnect between what people want and what the political leadership is doing. And it's not just now, but it's always been this way. And I was somebody who was very deeply involved in negotiations. And when I was involved in the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, the big push that I kept saying to people was that if you want to end violence, the only way that you can end it is by ending the causes of violence. People aren't violent because they want to be. There is violence because we see occupation, that people have been denied their freedom. And it's this equation that Israel must understand, that they've lived all of these years in a system in which they believe that they can only be safe if everybody else, particularly Palestinians, are unsafe. And that equation was shown to be false. This is why I think it's so important for the world not only to be pushing for a ceasefire, but to address the underlying causes of violence. And that is 75 years of ethnic cleansing of Palestine, 56 years that Palestinians have lived under military occupation. That we can't just keep kicking the can yet another year, yet another year, yet another year to another administration, another prime minister, another US president. The time is now. And if it doesn't happen now, I'm afraid we're just going to see the worst emerge. And I really do believe that we're going to look back on this in 2023 and ask ourselves, why is it that the world leaders didn't stop when they could have stopped this?
There is a question hanging over all of this of what happens when Israel does stop what they're doing in Gaza, the day after question that's there. Hamas has threatened to keep doing this again and again and again. Obviously, Israel will not accept a Gaza where Hamas is in control. If you were to get the ceasefire that you want, and then conversations begin on those next stages, who can credibly speak to the world for the Palestinians? Because Hamas is not going to be welcome at any table. And the Palestinian Authority, as we talked about last time, has deep credibility issues. Who is the person or group of people to speak for the Palestinians in the next phase of wherever this goes?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is it's up for Palestinians to decide.
Sure.
The essence of self-determination is that Palestinians and the people get to choose who their leaders are. Palestinians have lived for many, many years with everybody else deciding who speaks on behalf of Palestinians. And I really firmly believe that it's up to Palestinians to decide. In 2006, there was a democratic election. The world didn't like the outcome of the election, but at the end of the day, it was a democratic election. Many countries around the world even witnessed it. And if we go down the path of always saying that Palestinians don't get to choose their leaders, Palestinians don't get to choose their future, Palestinians don't get to have freedom, what is it? What is the message that we're saying? I firmly believe that when this ceasefire is over, the first thing that needs to be done, of course, is to rebuild. Israel also needs to be held to account. And I firmly believe that it's up to Palestinians to determine their own future. This is no longer the case where the United States gets to decide, Israel gets to decide, world leaders get to decide. It's up to Palestinians to be able to decide once and for all.
Diana Buttu, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.